The baby in the alley. The lights from the film set flickered through the early morning mist like distant stars struggling to shine. Rain had stopped an hour ago, but the pavement still shimmered under the soft weight of dawn. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the production lot, far from the cameras and wires and noise. He liked these quiet moments before filming began. The calm before bullets and fight scenes and stunts made everything feel like a storm. He was sipping black coffee from a paper cup, his coat zipped halfway, when he heard it. Not a cry. Not even a whimper. More like a muffled sound, soft and steady, like someone breathing in pain. He turned his head, narrowing his eyes, trying to find the source. Behind the dumpsters near the alley wall, a shadow shifted. Then he saw her, a woman, young, maybe early 20s, her back against the bricks holding something close to her chest. A baby wrapped in a tattered blanket. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking around. She was just sitting still, her eyes locked on her child, whispering gently like she was trying to keep the world away. Keanu didn't move at first. He just stood there staring, heart tightening in a way he didn't expect. This was downtown New Orleans, and filming often drew in bystanders. But this woman, she didn't look like she was passing through. The bags beside her weren't temporary. They were all she had. He stepped forward slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice low like he was afraid to break the air. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes darted up, wary, then down at her, baby again. Finally, she nodded once, almost like a reflex. He looked at her clothes. They were soaked from the night's rain, stained at the sleeves, fraying at the seams. The baby, maybe 7 or 8 months old, was asleep or pretending to be. Its little hand poked through the thin cloth. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered in a whisper. 3 nights. But we move. We don't stay long. He crouched down so he was eye level. He didn't introduce himself, didn't want to make it about him, didn't want to flash a name when what she needed was humanity. "What's your name?" he asked. "Callie," she said, voice barely louder than the rain that still dripped from a broken pipe overhead. "This is Noah." Keanu nodded slowly. The name, Noah, hit something deep in him. Maybe it was the look in the baby's closed eyes. Maybe it was just how small and fragile he seemed in the middle of a city that moved too fast to care. Callie started to shift, pulling the baby closer like she was preparing to leave, like she thought he might call security. "Wait," Keanu said, holding out a hand. Not to touch, just to pause her. "You're not in trouble, Look, I'm filming here for a few more days. If you need food or water or a place to stay, I can help. Just until you figure out your next step." She shook her head. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said gently. "It's kindness, and maybe a bit of selfishness, because if I walk away now, I'll regret it." Callie didn't speak. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked fast, swallowing hard. She wasn't used to people offering help without strings. Before either of them could say more, a voice called out from behind Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, we need you on set." 5 minutes. Keanu stood slowly. "I have to go, but I'll come back after the shoot." Callie looked unsure. Her body language said she was used to being abandoned, not remembered. "Here," he said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out his wallet, took out all the bills he had, maybe a few hundred, and handed them over. "This isn't a solution, just a bridge." She stared at the money like it was foreign. "You can keep it or throw it away, but please at least get something warm." He took a final look at the baby, still asleep or pretending. Then he walked back to the set, the air heavier behind him. But that night, after filming, Callie and Noah were gone. Not a trace. And what he found the next morning changed everything. Whispers behind the lens. Keanu Reeves stood in the exact spot where she had been. The alley was quiet now, except for the humming of the set generators in the distance and the faint rattle of a loose sign swinging above the back entrance. Morning traffic buzzed beyond the walls, uncaring and unaware of what had happened here just hours ago. But for him, the silence felt heavier, like the whole world had shifted during the night and no one else noticed. He crouched down slowly, his fingers trembling just slightly as he picked up the little sock, soft, pink, stained at the heel. The fabric clung to his skin, wet from the leftover rain. The folded paper inside was fragile, as if even breathing too hard might tear it. The 4 words hit him like a punch to the chest. He's not safe anymore. There was no name, no explanation, no clue where she had gone. Only a mother's desperation and a silent cry for help left behind. He stood up, turning the note over in his hand, hoping for something more. But it was blank and terrifying. The set manager came jogging over, clipboard in hand, already halfway through his sentence before he reached Keanu. "We need you in position, the director's..." But he stopped short, seeing Keanu's face. He paused, looking from the note to the sock to the shadow of something that had settled in Keanu's eyes. "Everything okay?" Keanu didn't answer. Right away. Finally, he just nodded once, quietly folding the note and tucking it into his jacket. "I'll be there in 5, he said, voice lower than usual, grounded in something that couldn't be explained with words. He walked slowly back toward the trailers, his mind not in the role he was supposed to play, not in the lines he had memorized. His focus had shifted completely, and though the cameras would capture every movement he made that day, none of them would capture the weight sitting in his chest. After the scene wrapped that afternoon, Keanu didn't join the others. For the catered lunch or the rooftop press photo, he slipped away unnoticed into the city, his hood pulled up and his pace unhurried but intentional. He knew this part of New Orleans. Not from filming, but from listening. He'd often walk the streets late at night, talking to strangers, sitting quietly beside the broken, the lost, the ignored. And if Callie had truly been here for 3 nights, there were people who had seen her. He started with a local vendor who sold coffee near the lot entrance, an older man with a deep accent and eyes that had seen too much. When Keanu showed him the sock and the note, the man's eyebrows furrowed. He nodded slowly, pointing toward a side street. She sat there with the baby 2 mornings ago. Didn't ask for anything, just rocked him, whispering things. Folks passed her like she was part of the sidewalk. Keanu followed the path, every step echoing with a sense of urgency. He checked alleyways, doorsteps, church steps, anywhere someone without shelter might have gone. He showed the sock to a woman handing out sandwiches. She shook her head, but the look in her eyes told him she understood the story behind it, even if she hadn't seen it herself. He moved block to block, hour to hour, until the sun began to fall behind the skyline. Finally, he found a lead. At a women's shelter on St. Roch Avenue, an exhausted volunteer looked up from behind a desk stacked with donated diapers and paperwork. When he asked about a young mother with a baby named Noah, her face changed. She didn't smile, didn't offer false comfort. But she stood up and walked over to a file cabinet, pulling out a handwritten log sheet. "She came in last night," the woman said. "Around midnight, soaking wet. Wouldn't talk much, just asked if there was a bed. The baby. He had a cough. Bad one. We gave her tea, dry clothes, let her rest upstairs." "Is she still here?" Keanu asked. The woman hesitated. "No. She left at sunrise. Said she couldn't stay." "Why?" he pressed. Too hard maybe, but he didn't care. The volunteer lowered her voice. "She said someone was looking for her. Not in a good way. Said she had to keep moving. Didn't want him to find her again. I didn't ask more. Sometimes these women come with stories they can't speak out loud." Keanu swallowed hard. Something inside him shifted from concern to resolve. He had seen pain on the faces of fictional enemies. He had stared down darkness through the lens of a camera, but nothing had prepared him for the real fear of a mother trying to outrun danger with nothing but a baby in her arms and no place to go. He asked the shelter worker if she'd seen which way Callie went. She nodded and pointed south, toward the edge of town, toward the docks, toward the part of the city that was quiet in the wrong ways. As Keanu left the shelter, night fell fast. Streetlights flickered to life and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain again. He walked faster, his thoughts racing, 100 worst-case scenarios looping in his mind. He didn't know what he would do if he found her, or how far he was willing to go, but one thing was certain: he would find her. Just as he passed under the rusted iron bridge near the river, he heard a sound. A baby. Coughing. Sharp. Dry. Heartbreaking. He froze. The alley up ahead was dark, but he could see the shape of a blanket near the dumpster just like before he stepped closer. "Callie," he whispered. The shape moved, but what he found wasn't what he expected, and someone else was already there. Beneath the iron bridge, Keanu Reeves stood frozen, his breath held like the world had stopped spinning around him. The man in front of him was not just any bystander. He was tall, lean in the wrong way, dressed in a coat that hadn't been washed in months, but his stance was alert, tight like a spring that could snap at any second. The crowbar in his hand gleamed slightly under the dim glow of a broken streetlight, and his eyes, sunken, darting, paranoid, spoke louder than any words could. He wasn't just dangerous, he was desperate, and desperate men made the worst decisions. The baby was behind him, nestled awkwardly in a dented carrier set on top of a crate, his tiny hands moving slowly as if trying to comfort himself through a cough that rattled the air like broken glass. Keanu raised his hands carefully, fingers open, voice calm but steady. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, locking eyes with the man, trying to assess the situation without triggering anything worse. "I'm just looking for the baby's mother. Her name's Callie. I think she's in trouble." The man laughed under his breath, though there was no humor in it. He shifted his grip on the crowbar, the sound of metal against skin sending a chill down Keanu's spine. "She left him," he growled, his voice raspy like sandpaper dragged across concrete. "Ran off an hour ago, said she'd come back. She won't, they never do." "You know her?" Keanu asked, taking a small step forward, slow enough not to be seen as a threat. "Is she safe?" The man's expression twisted. "Safe? Nobody's safe out here. Not her, not the kid, not you, not when you poke around places that ain't yours." For a moment, the world shrank into that alley, the smell of rust and river rot, the crying of the baby, the beat of Keanu's heart drumming in his ears. Years of film sets, choreography, and controlled stunts could never prepare someone for the real-life unpredictability of this exact moment. But Keanu knew one thing: panic only fed fire. Calm disarmed it. "Look," he said, his tone softer now, more human. "I'm not trying to take anything. I just want to help the child. He's sick. He needs care, real care. Not just warmth and hope. He needs a doctor. Please, let me take him." The man stared at him long and hard, his mind working like rusted gears grinding together. Then he looked back at the baby, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Remorse, maybe, or just the ghost of a conscience. He lowered the crowbar just slightly. "He's not mine," he muttered. "She dropped him here, asked me to watch him, gave me $40 and a sandwich, said she'd come back before dark. I waited. She didn't." Keanu took another step, his boots silent against the wet ground. "You did the right thing by keeping him safe this long. But he needs more than that now. Please, let me help." After a long silence, the man took a step back. "Not much, but enough." "Take him," he muttered, turning away, his shoulders dropping, as if the weight of the world had finally cracked him in half. "Take him before someone worse comes." Keanu didn't wait. He rushed forward and gently lifted the carrier, cradling the baby with care. Noah's skin was warm but clammy, and the wheezing in his chest was worse than it had been the day before. Keanu wrapped him in his coat, pressing the child close to his chest, whispering gently, like Callie had done. "I've got you, little one. You're okay now." He glanced back, but the man had already disappeared into the shadows like a ghost that had never been there to begin with. 20 minutes later, Keanu was in a cab racing across the city, heading toward the nearest emergency clinic that took walk-ins. The driver recognized him immediately but said nothing, sensing this was not a moment for fanfare. Inside the clinic, the nurses moved quickly once they heard the baby's lungs. An oxygen mask was brought in, tiny monitors attached, a rush of medical jargon flowing as they stabilized Noah. Keanu stayed in the waiting area, watching through the glass as doctors worked. He kept turning the note over in his hand, again and again, as if the answers were somehow hidden in the smudged handwriting. He felt helpless. And Keanu didn't like feeling helpless. Not when a baby's life was hanging in the balance. Not when a young mother was missing and frightened and running from something she didn't name. An hour later, the attending doctor came out and spoke to him. "He's stable now," she said. "But whoever's been caring for him, they haven't had access to proper nutrition or clean shelter. If you hadn't brought him in, he might not have lasted the night." Keanu closed his eyes briefly, a long breath escaping him. "Thank you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Can I see him?" She nodded. "Just for a few minutes." Inside the room, Noah lay on a small bed, bundled in clean blankets, a stuffed giraffe tucked beside him, probably donated by the clinic. His eyes were open now, barely, and they flicked toward Keanu as he sat down next to the bed. The child didn't smile, but he didn't cry either. He just stared, quiet, like he understood on some level that he was no longer alone. Keanu reached out, gently brushing a finger across the boy's tiny hand. "Your mom's out there," he said softly. "And I promise you, I'm going to find her. I don't care how far she's gone, I'm not giving up." Outside the room, the city moved on, oblivious. But somewhere in that same city, Callie sat on the floor of a stranger's apartment, knees pulled to her chest, blood on her sleeve, and eyes wide with terror, and someone was pounding on the door. The storm she ran from, the knocking grew louder. Not the kind of knock that waits for permission, but the kind that promises to break the door in. Callie stood paralyzed in the dim room, her breath caught in her chest, her eyes darting toward the small window that faced a back alley. The stranger who had offered her a place to rest, an older woman named Myra who lived alone and handed out sandwiches behind the shelter, wasn't home. She'd left minutes ago to get more milk and medicine for Noah, trusting Callie would still be here when she returned. She didn't know that the past Callie had tried to bury had found her again. She didn't know that this wasn't just a story of a runaway mother or a lost girl. This was survival. And the man on the other side of the door wasn't someone who knocked twice before taking what he wanted. Callie backed away slowly, blood still sticky on her wrist from the scratch she'd gotten trying to escape him earlier in the week. She had thought she'd lost him for good when she left Baton Rouge. She had changed buses, slept in parks, and avoided every set of eyes that lingered too long. But it hadn't been enough. He had found her again. She reached for the bag she kept close, a tattered thing full of diapers, baby wipes, and the worn envelope that held Noah's birth certificate. No money left, not even a coin. The last of it had gone to the man with the crowbar to watch her son for just a few hours. The guilt of that decision still burned through her, but at the time it had been the only way to keep Noah safe while she tried to lead her past away from him. The banging on the door stopped. Silence. That was worse. She knew his patterns. She knew how he toyed with people. Her fingers trembled as she inched toward the window. It was stuck at the bottom, the wood swollen from years of rain and neglect. She pressed harder, wedging her shoulder into it, trying not to make noise. Finally, with a groan of old hinges, it gave way, just wide enough. She slipped through, scraping her hip on the frame, then dropped onto the pavement below. The alley was empty, darkened by tall fences and brick walls. She didn't wait, didn't look back. She ran. 3 blocks away, the night was waking up. Neon lights buzzed over shuttered storefronts, and the sound of a saxophone drifted from a bar down the road. But Callie wasn't thinking about music or lights. Her legs burned as she sprinted, lungs begging for air, heart pounding like a war drum. She didn't stop until she reached a payphone near a closed gas station, the kind most people didn't even know still existed. She grabbed the receiver and dialed the number she remembered from the note Keanu had given her. A number he scribbled on the back of a napkin and pressed into her hand before leaving the alley that first morning. "If you need help," he had said, "call this no matter what." She hadn't planned to use it, hadn't planned to ever need someone else again. But now, with everything unraveling, it was the only lifeline left. On the third ring, someone picked up. "Hello?" It was his voice. Calm, familiar, grounding. Callie opened her mouth, but for a moment, no words came. She pressed the receiver to her forehead, shaking. "Hello?" he asked again, a little louder. "Is someone there?" "It's me," she whispered. "It's Callie." There was silence, then a breath. "Are you okay? Where's Noah?" "He's safe," she said, quickly. "You found him. Thank you. Thank you for saving him. I'm sorry I left, he found me. He's looking for me. He almost got in." "Where are you now?" Keanu asked, voice tightening, concern bleeding through every syllable. "Corner of Claiborne and St. Roch," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Behind the old gas station." "Stay there," he said. "I'm coming." He hung up. 15 minutes later, headlights swept across the pavement as a black SUV pulled into the lot. Callie flinched at first, until the window rolled down and Keanu leaned across the seat, opening the door from the inside. She slid in quickly, breathless, hair clinging to her damp face. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes scanning her arms, her face, every inch of her. "No," she said. "Just scared. I didn't know where else to go." "You did the right thing," he said, shifting the car into gear. "You're not alone anymore." They drove in silence for a few blocks, the city passing by like a forgotten dream. Callie's eyes brimmed with tears, but she kept them in. She wasn't used to safety, wasn't used to someone else carrying the weight. She had carried much for too long. Finally, Keanu broke the silence. "He's going to be okay," he said gently. "Noah, the doctor said you got him there just in time. He's strong." She nodded slowly. "He always was." "Who is he, Callie?" Keanu asked after a long pause. "The man who's after you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, her voice cracked as she whispered, "His father." Keanu's jaw tightened. Callie turned her head, eyes staring out the window like she was watching a movie from a different life. He wasn't like that in the beginning. He was kind, smart, made me feel seen. But once I got pregnant, he changed. The shouting turned to shoving, the jealousy turned to threats. And then, I stopped being a person to him. Just something he owned, something he controlled. Keanu didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a safe space for her voice. "I left when Noah was 4 months old," she continued. "Snuck out one night with just a diaper bag and a $20 bill. I thought if I kept moving, he'd give up. But he never did. He followed me through cities, through shelters, through every door I tried to close." Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded note, the one she left in the sock. He handed it to her. "This saved him. That note, that choice. You protected him in the only way you could. Don't forget that." Callie clutched it in her hands, finally letting the tears fall, silent, raw, real. The car stopped in front of a safe house, one of several Keanu helped fund quietly, away from headlines or press. He stepped out and opened her door. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we talk to the police. We make this official. No more running." Callie nodded slowly, stepping out into the soft glow of safety she didn't think she'd ever feel again. But as they walked toward the door, someone across the street lit a cigarette and watched them silently. His eyes followed every step. And, in his hand, a burner phone buzzed with a message that read, "Found her." The shadows we carry, the night felt like it had stretched longer than it should. Inside the quiet walls of the safe house, the air held a kind of heavy silence, one born, not from peace but from everything unspoken. The place was simple but clean, with soft lighting and a warmth that came not from expensive furniture but from the kind of quiet compassion money couldn't buy. Callie sat on the edge of a small bed tucked into a corner room, her hands clasped, together in her lap so tightly her knuckles were pale. She hadn't even taken off her shoes. The room offered safety, yet her body hadn't caught up to the idea. Her mind was still in alleyways, still crouching behind dumpsters, still listening for the sound of footsteps that had chased her for far too long. Keanu Reeves stood in the hallway, speaking quietly with the coordinator of the house, a woman named Evelyn. She was in her 60s, stern in posture but soft in the eyes, the kind of person who had spent decades lifting others from the edge without expecting anything in return. She gave him a nod after a few minutes, then walked past him and gently knocked on Callie's door. Callie looked up but didn't answer. The knock came again, followed by Evelyn's voice, low and kind. "I brought you something warm. Just tea. No questions." After a pause, the door opened a crack. Callie reached out, took the cup with both hands, and whispered, "Thank you." Evelyn nodded once and walked away, leaving her alone again. Keanu leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, mind spinning. In the past 48 hours, his world had gone from stunt choreography and movie lines to police reports, medical charts, and now, this. He hadn't expected it, hadn't planned for it, but he didn't regret a single step. There was something about Callie's strength, buried beneath exhaustion and fear, that stirred something deep inside him, a sense of responsibility that went beyond charity. He saw her, not as a case or a cause, but as a person, someone who had done everything she could to protect the most precious thing in her life, and yet still walked through the world as if she didn't deserve to be seen. When Callie finally stepped out into the hallway, the tea gone, her expression was calmer, but her eyes betrayed the storm still swirling inside. She walked slowly toward him, arms wrapped around herself. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. I know you didn't have to." He met her eyes, his voice steady. "I didn't do it because I had to." They stood there in silence for a few moments before Callie spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Noah is... he's still at the clinic?" "Yes," Keanu said. "They're keeping him overnight again, just to be safe, but he's doing better. Stronger." Callie nodded, biting her lip to keep herself from crying. "I need to see him tomorrow." "You will," he promised. "But tonight you rest. Tomorrow we go to the police, we tell them everything." She hesitated. "What if they don't believe me?" "They will," he said firmly. "And if they don't, I'll make sure someone does. You're not alone anymore, Callie. We're going to end this, no more hiding." A small tremble passed through her shoulders, but she nodded. For the first time in what felt like years, someone believed in her without asking for something in return. But across the city, in a hotel room lit by a flickering television, a different conversation was taking place. The man who had been following her stood by the window, the cigarette still burning in his fingers. Behind him, a second man entered the room, cleaner cut, sharper eyes, a scar down one cheek. He closed the door with care, locking it behind him before walking to the table and setting down a photograph. Blurry but clear enough to see Callie stepping into the safe house, Keanu Reeves at her side. "So it's true," the second man said, voice quiet but dangerous. "She's with him." The first man exhaled smoke and gave a humorless smile. "Seems like it. Hollywood hero playing bodyguard now." "She's been talking," the second man said, flipping the photo face down. "We can't let that happen." "Then what's the plan?" the first asked. The man with the scar leaned in, voice low. "We find the kid. We make her come to us." Back at the safe house, Keanu was going over the events again in his mind. The note, the alley, the baby's condition, the man with the crowbar. Everything about Callie's story made sense. Too much sense. Her bruises, her panic, the way she flinched every time a door closed too loudly. But there was something more. Something she hadn't told him yet. A piece still missing. He knocked on her door again gently and waited. Callie opened it, already sensing he wasn't finished. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "When you left the baby with that man near the bridge, and did you tell him anything about where you were going next?" Callie shook her head. "No, I didn't trust him with that. I barely trusted him to keep Noah safe for an hour." "Okay," Keanu said. "Then how did someone find us here so fast?" Only a few people know you're here. Callie's eyes widened slightly, the color draining from her face. You think someone's watching? She asked, voice cracking. I think someone might have followed you before we met. Or someone planted something. A tracker. A phone. Anything. Callie rushed to her bag and emptied it on the floor. Diapers, wipes, baby bottles, an old baby monitor, and the envelope. Nothing stood out. Keanu took the bag and inspected the lining, his fingers running over seams. Then he found it. A small slit at the bottom near the hem. Tucked inside, nearly weightless, was a tracking tag. No bigger than a coin, black and smooth with a blinking red light barely visible unless you looked directly at it. Callie's breath caught in her throat. He put that in there, she said, her voice breaking. He must have sewn it in when I wasn't looking. Keanu crushed the device beneath his boot, grinding it into the tile until the light disappeared. Then it ends now, he said. We're going to the police first thing, and I'm hiring private security for you and Noah until this is over. He doesn't get to control your life anymore. Callie sank to the floor, overwhelmed, her back against the bed frame. I'm so tired, she whispered, so tired of running. Keanu crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Then stop running, he said. Stand, fight, and let people help you this time. In the hospital that night, baby Noah stirred in his sleep. Outside the window, a car drove by slowly, headlights dimmed. Someone inside the vehicle took a picture with a long lens and made a call. She's got protection. And the baby's in the clinic. We strike tomorrow. The fire inside the quiet man, the hospital room was in chaos. Drawers pulled open, a chair toppled, medical charts scattered across the floor, and near the far wall, shattered glass from the open window, the blinds swaying lightly in the breeze, as if mocking the stillness that had been broken. The crib was empty. A small folded blanket remained, the same one Callie had wrapped Noah in since he was born. The nurse sat slumped in the corner, eyes red and puffy, her face pale as she muttered the same words over and over, like a broken recording. I stepped out for 1 second. 1 second. He was asleep. I swear he was asleep. Callie didn't scream. She didn't collapse or cry. She simply stood there in complete stillness, staring at the empty crib. Her breath held so tightly in her chest it felt like her heart had stopped. Everything around her, the nurse's sobs, the clatter of footsteps from security, the rising panic in the hallway, became nothing but white noise. She felt her body disconnect from the moment, as if she were floating just above it all, unable to reach her own child through the thin veil of a nightmare that was now real. Keanu was already moving. He had rushed past the front desk as soon as the alarms were triggered, stormed up the stairs 2 at a time, and burst into the room seconds before Callie. Now, standing beside her, his fists clenched and jaw tight, he surveyed the room like a battlefield. No signs of forced entry through the door, no security cameras at the back alley window. Someone had known exactly what they were doing, and exactly when to strike. Check the footage from the East Wing hallway, he snapped to the nearest orderly. And call every patrol unit within 5 miles. We're not waiting. We start, now. Callie finally found her voice, but it came out small and empty. They took him. They took my baby. Keanu turned to her, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. His voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It grounded her. We're going to get him back, Callie, whatever it takes. Noah is coming home. 20 minutes later, they were in the back seat of a police cruiser being driven to the precinct by a detective named Marcus Hayes, a seasoned officer with a tired face and sharp eyes who had handled missing persons cases longer than most had, stayed in the force. As they sped through the streets, Keanu explained everything. How he found Callie, the tracker in her bag, the threats she received, the man with the crowbar, the strange vehicles that had trailed them. Detective Hayes listened closely, saying nothing at first. But once they arrived, he pulled Keanu aside in the hallway outside the interview room. We may be dealing with more than a custody dispute, Hayes said in a low voice. We've had reports of an underground network. Men who sell identities, move people across borders. Sometimes they use children to pressure the mothers, blackmail them into silence. If she's been hiding from someone like that, this may not be about revenge, it may be about control. Ownership. Keanu's eyes darkened. They don't get to own anyone, not anymore. Inside the interview room, Callie gave her full statement. Her hands trembled, but her voice held firm as she described Noah's father. His manipulation, his cruelty. The way he used kindness like a mask to get close before turning everything into control. She told them about the scars on her back, the threats he'd made, and the night she finally fled when she found him standing over Noah's crib, whispering something she couldn't hear. It had been the final straw. She didn't pack. She didn't leave a note. She just ran and kept running. Until the morning, Keanu had found her in the alley, holding her baby like a lifeline. Hayes nodded slowly as she finished. Do you have any idea who might be helping him? Someone with resources, maybe ties to law enforcement or local shelters? Callie shook her head. No one. I stayed invisible. I never stayed in one place. I never even told anyone my full name. Keanu leaned forward, his mind working. Unless someone tracked her from the inside, the man she paid to watch Noah, that might have been the leak. He wasn't random. Maybe he was placed there. As the detective made calls and set alerts, across the city, Keanu called a contact of his, someone from a private security firm he had worked with on past humanitarian efforts. Within an hour, they had satellite support, street camera access, and facial recognition scans sweeping through every exit point in New Orleans. They weren't just relying on the system anymore. They were creating one of their own. By sundown, they had something. A grainy clip from a bus station security feed showed a man holding Noah, wrapped tightly in a different blanket, his face turned toward the man's chest. The timestamp was from an hour after the kidnapping. They had boarded a bus headed north. No ticket purchase records, no ID. Just a man with a hat pulled low and sunglasses hiding in plain sight. Keanu stood over the screen as the video looped, his jaw tense. Pause it, he said. The technician stopped the clip at the exact moment the man turned slightly toward the camera. Keanu's breath caught, the scar. It ran from the man's cheekbone to his jaw. The same scar Callie had described once in a whisper as something she used to trace with her finger before she knew who he really was. That's him, Keanu said quietly. He's not going far. He's trying to disappear. But he doesn't know we're watching now. As they coordinated with state troopers and neighboring jurisdictions, Callie sat beside Keanu, her face pale but her voice stronger now. He's going to hurt him, she said. He thinks if he breaks Noah, he breaks me. That's what this is, not love, not even obsession, just power. Keanu looked at her, a steel fire in his voice. Then he chose the wrong boy and the wrong mother. We're not backing down. Just before midnight, a call came in. The bus had been stopped at a small gas station 50 miles outside of town, after a sharp-eyed clerk recognized the man from the description. The suspect fled into the woods behind the building, leaving Noah behind in a storage room, frightened but unharmed. Local deputies had taken him into custody. He was safe. When the call came through, Callie collapsed into Keanu's arms. The sobs she had been holding back for days poured out like a flood. Relief, grief, exhaustion, and a kind of joy that no words could ever fully describe. She clung to him like a rope in a storm, and he held her like someone who had promised himself he would never let her fall. Hours later, in the quiet of a hospital recovery room, Callie sat beside Noah, cradling him gently, whispering lullabies, through tears as Keanu stood nearby, watching with a soft smile. Outside, the manhunt continued, but for now, in this room, there was peace. As dawn broke and light spilled across the windowsill, Callie looked up at Keanu and said, "You didn't have to stay, but you did. Why?" Keanu smiled, his voice low and sure. "Because someone stayed, for me once, and it changed everything." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with something new, not fear but hope. And from that day on, Callie never ran again.